Start events. Here we can see all the different type of start events that we can use. We have message start events, time start events, multiple start events, and sub-process start events. We can see each one of these has an internal code that helps us identify each object. The message start event is going to allow us to initiate a process when someone inputs data into the system. We're going to see more of this later. Time start events are going to allow us to initiate a process when a moment in time happens. And multiple start events are a combination of both of these two. So if we use a multiple start event, we can initiate a process by time or because someone inputs data into the system. And then there's sub-process start events that allow us to initiate a sub-process. Okay, a sub-process is a child of a parent process. So let's say you have a parent process, and this parent process might have one or several child processes. And we can go down as many levels as we want. For example, I could say I have a grandparent process, and within this grandparent process, I have a parent process, and within this parent process, I have a child process. Okay, so what can a start message event do? It can initiate a process when someone inputs data into the system, into this object. So let's say we have a drone, and this drone arrives at a certain location, it takes some pictures, and it starts a process. Okay, how does it start a process? Because it's inputting data into the system. It took some pictures and it input those pictures into the system. And by doing this, it initiated a process. Actually, processes could also be started without data. We could just have a drone arrive at a certain place and they just trigger the process so it starts. How else could we input data? It could be manual or human intervention. For example, someone fills in a form, for example, with the material they need, and once they do this, the process starts. For example, we have here an order management process. Who starts this process? Anyone who can create an order. So as soon as they fill in the order form, they input the data into this form, and by doing so, they submit, they click on a button submit, and that starts a process. Or it could be any other thing that can input data into the system. For example, another application. Let's say there's an ERP that accumulates several invoices that are pending to be paid. And once it inputs these invoices into the system, it initiates a collection management process. So anything that can input data into the system is going to be able to initiate a process via a message start event. Okay, so message start events are used to initiate processes when they receive information. They can receive this information from other systems, machines, or people. It doesn't matter. Anyone could actually input this information and trigger the process. Now, we have to take into account that depending on the type of BPMS tool that we're using to diagram our processes, it's interesting to know that in Autoportal, in one unique start event, you can have lots of several actions. For example, let's say here we have an example of how a different system would diagram a process. They have one object indicating that in this object they're going to register an employee in Office 360. In the next object they're going to create an Office access card. In the third object they indicate that they're going to create a confidentiality contract. And on the fourth object they're going to assign clients to the employee. So all of these four different objects in Autoportal, it would only be one. Why? Because in Autoportal, forms are very advanced and you can input a lot of intelligence into them. For example, let's say we create a form where there's four different tabs. This is a very easy example to understand, where someone can enter this form. First, they're going to register the information for Office 360. Then they're going to activate the access. Then they're going to create the contract. And at the end, they're going to assign different clients to the employee. And once they've finished all these 4 steps, they click on submit and the process starts. Okay, so how many objects did we need to initiate this process? 1. How many actions took place inside of this object? Lots of actions. Okay, so it's not necessary for us to diagram or add a whole bunch of objects to a diagram in order to just do one step. If it's the same performer and the performer doesn't change, this performer could do in this object all kinds of different activities. Okay. Now, how do we start a process with a time event? All we have to do is set up a parameter in the time event that indicates when the process is going to start. And this parameter is always going to be a moment in time. For example, let's say we want to start a process once a month, every 13th of each month at 1:50 p.m. Okay, so this is something we have to set up. We enter the time event, we set up on what day and on what time we want it to start, and that's about it. And we've got our object perfectly configured and ready to start working with. Now, as I was mentioning before, a main process or a parent process could have different child processes or what we call sub-processes. So a sub-process always consists of 2 parts. One part would be its compressed notation. Okay, its compressed notation is an object with a hyperlink to an IS. So on some other part of the diagram, we have to develop or we have to draw the developed notation of the subprocess. So what we're saying here is that within this object here, when the flow arrives to this object, it's going to perform whatever actions are inside. Okay, so the flow enters, and as soon as it enters, it links to this start event. Okay, as soon as it links to this subprocess start event, the subprocess can start being managed. Okay, so the child process can be triggered.